Throughout the last few weeks, I have been absolutely appalled at what I've seen from the nation's police. The people that we pay to serve and protect us have clearly not been doing what we pay them to do. And the straw that broke the proverbial back of this whole problem was the needless and senseless murder of George Floyd. I was trying to find the best way to address this topic and saw a video on Prager U that absolutely infuriated me.
What's your message to the people? Their message is one of peace. What is your message?
My message has been clear from day one 2 years ago. This anti-cop sentiment from this hateful ideology called Black Lives Matter has fueled this rage against the American police officer. I predicted this 2 years ago. So what I want to know,
okay, Sheriff.
do I want to know?
With all due respect, do you know that this was because of that?
Yes, I do.
As a law enforcement officer?
I've been watching this for 2 years. I predicted this. This anti-police rhetoric sweeping the country has turned out some hateful things inside of people that are now playing themselves out on the American police officer. I want to know, with all of the black-on-black violence in the United States of America, by the way, when the tragedies happened in Louisiana and Minnesota, you know that 21 black people were murdered across the United States? Was there any reporting on that?
There was a black officer who was killed today. But
was there any reporting on that?
Sheriff, please, let's just keep the volume down here. So I understand, and listen, I'm
looking at 3 dead cops this week, Sheriff, and I'm looking at 5 last year. You trying to tell me to keep it down?
Just please, if you'll just please, we can keep it civil. So, because the message to people at home, I'm sure you want, is one of civility.
I wish, Don, I wish you had that message of civility
have a conversation
toward this hateful ideology, these purveyors of hate.
You don't know what my message is.
That's
what I want
they
to say
do.
to you is,
these people preach vile and virtue in the name of hate.
That was David Clark, former sheriff of Milwaukee County, Wisconsin. He has over 39 years of experience in law enforcement as a police officer in that area. From an officer on the street to sheriff, he worked his way through the ranks. In the last 15 years of his career, he was sheriff. So let's see what he had to say on the matter of protesting police brutality and killings by officers.
I've met a lot of cops of every race, ethnicity, and background. Here's what I can tell you. Cops are not perfect. That's not a news flash, but this might be. They don't have to be perfect. They have to be excellent. And most officers reach excellence every single day and often under very difficult circumstances, circumstances you can't imagine and wouldn't want to if you could. Perfection is an unattainable goal.
Excellence. Interesting choice of word. Perfection should be something to strive for, and while it is technically unattainable, you go for it, and you don't settle for less. When I was an active duty Marine, we didn't strive for excellence. We strived for perfection. We did that because lives hung in the balance of everything we did. To me, excellence is just a fancy word for good enough. When you have a responsibility and a civic duty to protect and serve, good enough does not cut it. I expect perfection from those trusted to enforce laws and protect the people. 15 years as sheriff, and you didn't expect perfection from your employees or fellow officers? Be glad you never worked for me. You may never reach perfection, but you damn sure try. Saying it is an unattainable goal is an excuse and nothing else.
Cops are ordinary human beings, like everyone else. Lawyers, surgeons, and baseball players, they make mistakes. But no profession works harder to correct its mistakes. You can mark social progress by the improvements made by police departments over the last 50 years. Today, police are more professional, better educated, and better trained than at any time in their history.
Yeah, cops, lawyers, and surgeons and baseball players can make mistakes. We're all only human, after all. However, lawyers can be disbarred or have a client that's innocent go face the death penalty. Doctors face malpractice and wrongful death suits, and baseball players lose the big game. That's about all they have to worry about. When you make a mistake as a police officer, someone could die in that moment. That is why I expect perfection from law enforcement. I don't care about the baseball player. Cops, doctors, and lawyers are held to a higher standard, one you don't seem to see the need to reach, apparently. What have we seen from charges being brought against cops? A whole division resigning from their assigned job. Good cops, yes, there are some out there, being effectively abandoned and viewed with distrust for holding their fellow officers accountable, and a civilian populace that can get almost nowhere in civil and criminal cases because police are effectively above the law with practices like qualified immunity, which effectively exempts them from wrongdoing because they were doing their jobs. What we have today is not law enforcement that is accountable. It is a legal version of a mob. Officers allowed to scrub their records, resigning and moving to other precincts, and given time to put together a statement in 24 to 72 hours, which is a luxury you would never afford anyone else. That is horrifying. Police are not above the law. Let's cover the three things you touched on here. Is it professional to shove a 75-year-old man to the ground and stand there while he bleeds from a head wound? Is it professional for a cop to fire his weapon into a man cooperating and informing an officer he has a weapon in the vehicle and where it is so that he knows and is killed while trying to comply with conflicting and confusing commands? Is it professional for a cop to kneel on a man's neck for more than 8 minutes while he is secured and no threat and kills him as a result, and him and his fellow officers have their fucking hands in their pockets? That is not professional, not by any definition of the word. As for being better educated, there are a concerning number of cops that do not know the law and throw their perceived authority around senselessly and needlessly, making things up as they go. The training is a whole other issue. Being trained to act like everyone is a threat makes you see threats everywhere. Being trained to be a predator so you can hunt other predators makes you look at everyone else as prey. Most people are just going about their lives and are no threat, and the small percentage that are threats don't need to be gunned down either. Your training is horrible. Even my fellow military members weren't taught to see everyone as a threat. We were taught to recognize threats and act appropriately, which isn't always with lethal force. Even the military, whose primary occupation is war, are held accountable more than cops are. We successfully govern ourselves, so to speak, and when one of us messes up, we are held accountable. If cops did the things they do around the people I served with as part of the command, they would get destroyed. They would be dishonorably discharged, which is a discharge you get with an accompanying felony on your record, after being taken to the brig immediately. No show of solidarity would be happening either unless those people wanted to be charged too.
You wouldn't know it, though, if you listened to self-serving, self-righteous politicians and activists. In their version of history, the police are the villains of the story, not its heroes. Like everything else this crowd does, they've got it all backwards.
Oh, do tell. This hasn't been the result of one incident. This has been building for a long time and certainly has not been an isolated occurrence. This is a systemic problem.
The police aren't the problem. The politicians and activists are. The police didn't create the failed urban policies that have locked people into generational poverty. The police aren't responsible for fatherless homes, failing schools, and bad lifestyle choices. And they sure as hell aren't responsible for the lack of respect shown to police officers. It is this lack of respect for authority, fostered over decades by the progressive left and its fear the police narrative, that has led to the needless deaths of so many young black men.
You couldn't go 30 seconds before I had to step in and address this. Yes, one could argue that politicians have enacted policies that do not work as intended. You may not have enacted those policies, but as part of the system, you have a louder voice than the general populace. It is your job to not only enforce the law, but to make sure those in power that count on you to enforce those laws know the problems in their policies and where those problems are. You are not exempt from blame here. The activists are the civilians you are supposed to serve and protect. They are telling you what they see and what they experience. You are, in effect, the liaison between civilians and elected officials from a law enforcement standpoint. These are citizens pointing out a problem that you should be addressing, not shifting the blame elsewhere. Respect is earned. When police do things that erode that respect and trust, it is hard to get that back. It isn't a lack of respect for authority that is the problem. It is the authority showing that respect is misplaced. You're seeing the results of building tension because you failed to do your job, individually and collectively.
When Officer Darren Wilson told Michael Brown to get out of the middle of the street in Ferguson, Missouri, did Brown comply? No. When officers in Baltimore told Freddie Gray to stop resisting arrest, did he comply? No. When officers in New York City told Eric Garner to stop resisting arrest, did he comply? No. Here's a useful tip. If you want to avoid a bad outcome with a police officer, follow this simple rule. When a cop gives you a lawful command, obey it, even if you disagree. Whatever problem you are experiencing is not going to be settled on the street. People with complaints need to use the process established for that purpose. Though cops don't have the final say, they do in that moment. How you react can be a matter of life or death.
Resisting arrest is something I have noticed has been thrown around erroneously quite a bit, but he does bring up a good point. In the moment, even if the cops are issuing unlawful orders and being generally unreasonable, you are not going to win in that moment. The courts are where you win cases against them. Record as much as you can, voice concerns in a civil manner, and take it to the judge. You cannot defend yourself in court if you are dead. Though they may be throwing their authority around, do what you can to ensure you see your day in court, even if it means letting yourself be put in cuffs. Documentation leads to accountability and shows the courts and the people what is going on. We all have a high-definition recording device on us at all times. Use it. And despite what I've said thus far, he is right in this instance. Take every legal avenue available to you to get justice for unlawful acts from the police. Do not give them a reason to make you a martyr. I realize in light of events like what happened with George Floyd, this may seem like bad advice, but do what you can to make sure it's you that's standing in front of the judge to make them accountable. Do not give them a reason to hurt you. Make sure that the judge hears the case from you and not the people that saw you die. I cannot stress that enough.
But the idea that a law-abiding citizen has to fear the police is a terrible and destructive lie. Let's get some perspective. In 2014, 990 people were killed in police use of force incidents. Does that sound like a lot? Did you know that according to a Johns Hopkins study, that same year medical errors killed 250,000 people, yet activists aren't marching in the streets demanding that the medical profession be reformed? Why not?
Firstly, because they are already held accountable and liable for needless deaths. Secondly, that 990 number is an indication that you should not be treating everyone as criminals and shows that the Wild West feel you threw in earlier is unjustified. Most people are law-abiding, but this just highlights the problem. How many people were unlawfully detained or arrested because you see threats everywhere when the numbers here do not justify that kind of training or response? I would argue that with proper training, this number would drop by at least 50%, if not more. You are not supposed to act like you are at war with the public, and acting like you are is a big part of the problem.
Why is it that the people who protect you from the bad guys, and I've seen these bad guys close up, are the subject of distrust and anger? Why is it that groups like Black Lives Matter, I call them Black Lies Matter, because it's based on the falsehood that police represent a danger to black people, are celebrated by the media and politicians?
Police are not trusted because they are not held accountable, and many times have a history of bad behavior, yet are still allowed to work in their official capacity. The reason movements like Black Lives Matter are so vocal is because of the disparity in the use of violence against those that are not pale enough in power. Let's face it, if you don't share the same coloration with a roll of Bounty paper towels, you're going to be automatically viewed with suspicion by the cops generally and are going to be the target of more force. This is a systemic problem, as I said, that has been present for decades and is ingrained in the culture of police officers. I am shocked that you have somehow been unaware of this. It does not matter that you think they are lies. The data is in, and you don't get to bury your head in the sand for literally years to avoid it.
All this is taking its toll on cops, and even more tragically, on the law-abiding citizens in the neighborhoods that most need a strong police presence. The murder rates in these neighborhoods are going up because lawful aggressive policing is going down. Heather McDonald of the Manhattan Institute has explained why. She calls it the Ferguson effect, and it's real. It's also common sense. Why police officers reason: put your career at risk if 30 seconds of smartphone video taken out of context can destroy it.
Even 30 seconds of video can tell a story when police write a fraudulent report. These officers are not displaying excellence or professionalism. They are displaying the kind of behavior that demands reform and accountability. I've seen countless videos showing the same kind of power-mad bullshit from across the nation. Every so often, I do see footage of a good cop, professional, reasonable, patient. While they are out there, they get overshadowed by the bad ones because the bad ones are not held accountable for their actions. Whatever you want to call it, be it the Ferguson effect or some other name, professional behavior will make sure they don't have to worry about their careers. You have less lethal options at your disposal. Use them, and use them sensibly.
Here's the truth. Police aren't afraid of walking the streets or being shot by random criminals. They're afraid of being involved in an incident that would label them forever as trigger-happy racists. Are there bad cops? I know firsthand that there are. I've had to fire them. But the overwhelming majority are good, decent men and women concerned about the law-abiding citizens in the communities they serve and are willing to put their lives on the line to protect them.
Yes, as I said, there are good cops, but firing the bad ones isn't enough. They need to be properly disciplined, which means being barred from law enforcement positions anywhere else until they're evaluated and retrained if necessary. And that's just for reasons that don't result in death. Those involved in lethal incidents don't need to be back on the street until an investigation is done. And if that cop is at fault and kills someone without justification, fucking prosecute him. How hard is that concept to understand?
Those who try to convince you, either out of ignorance or out of some ideological agenda, that the police are the enemy, those are the people you should fear. Run from them, not the cops.
You have managed to completely misrepresent what is happening here. No one is saying the cops are necessarily the enemy. They do perform a needed public service, but a concerning number of them are corrupt, poorly trained, unprofessional, and hard to hold accountable. That is the problem, and that is what needs to change. Get rid of the bad cops, and the good ones can shine and set an example instead of being overshadowed by bad ones that bury the whole system under a stinking pile of shit.